Migrants webinar. This webinar is in cooperation with the Progressive Islamic Forum in Indonesia. And my co-host is Rizky Apia.
Hello everyone, and it's nice to be here, and thank you very much also for all the speakers who have attended this event. So yeah.
So before we proceed, let us go first for some introduction about what is Inform all about. The Interfaith Network for the Rights of Migrants, or Inform, was established in 2010 in Manila during the Interfaith Dialogue on Children, Family, and Migration. It is a network of different faith communities of Christians, Muslims, Hindu, who are supporting the struggle of migrants for human rights, justice, and decent work, and against all forms of abuse, exploitation, human trafficking, and modern slavery. Just recently, Faith Network organized various solidarity actions and conferences, the latest of which is the Interfaith Mission that held in Indonesia in 2018. And this webinar is our aim of strengthening the support of faith communities to the struggle of the marginalized people, particularly the migrants and their families. So once again, welcome you all for this webinar. To introduce our first panel of speakers, may I call my co-host, Rizky.
Yes, thank you, Reverend. So the first speaker is Muhammad Al-Fayed. He is a contemporary Indonesian Muslim scholar and activist. He's also a co-founder of Nahdiyin Front for Sovereignty of National Resources, and he's also a teacher at Nurul Jadid Islamic Boarding School. He will be speaking to us about the state of Muslim communities in Indonesia, because Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world, and it has now more than 20,000 COVID cases at present. So Fayed will discuss the current situations of Muslim communities in Indonesia grappling the effect of pandemic crisis in observance of Ramadan. So Fayed, without further ado, time's yours.
Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace upon you. Happy Ramadan, happy fasting. Thank you for Inform, Asia Pacific Mission for Migrants, and Forum Islam Progressive, and also dear all the panelists and participants of this session. I'm very thankful to God for this moment to be part of you in sharing my ideas and my observation about what happens now in Indonesia, especially in the time of pandemic COVID-19. And I just want to introduce myself before starting my speech. My name is Muhammad Al-Fayed. You can call me Fayed. And I'm a writer and a publisher and also editor, and also a teacher in a traditional Islamic boarding school called in Indonesia as a pesantren in Nurul Jadid, Probolinggo. Probolinggo is a city just 3 hours from Surabaya, the capital of East Java. And you know that we are in recent days very affected by COVID-19. Our Islamic boarding school has been closed since at least 1 month. and all the students have to go home and so on. So this is very experiencing moment for me, and very touching subject for me to speak about this. Okay, so now in my province in East Java, East Java is one of the greatest hits by from the second greatest province hit by COVID-19, and one of the factors of this pandemic is a great cluster of Hajj grouping in Surabaya, where there was training. So many participants from this cluster training has been affected, or at least have to be they show indicated to be affected, either sick by or normal by COVID-19 and so on. And this is the main issue we have to deal with in East Java, because East Java, you know, is one of the greatest province with a number of religious mass organization, Nahdlatul Ulama, and this raises the question about the role of religion amidst the crisis. So I think it is very interesting to speak what the actual state of Muslim communities, not only in East Java or in Java, but also in Indonesia amid the pandemic. And I just want to start from my fragmented observation. I mean that this pandemic is still going on, and we don't have any final consideration about its impact to Muslim communities in national scale in Indonesia. But at least in Java, we have some case to be observed and evaluate whether the Muslim communities can survive better on wars otherwise amidst the crisis. So for me, my interpretation about the actual situation, that the actual state of Muslim communities and in Indonesia during this pandemic is very affected by three factors. The first is the worsening crisis of capitalism. I mean that this pandemic has emerged or caused some mobilization of the workers in big cities like Jakarta and Surabaya and so on. And when the labor condition of these workers are affected directly by the crisis, by the virus, and this changed everything. So this is the one factor I think very important to be analyzed and to be delivered, and we have to start with the problem of this condition of workers and so on, especially in big cities, because they are very precarious to be inflicted or affected by the virus. And the second factor, I think we must speak of related to the actual condition of Muslim communities is the state policy. I think the state policy towards Muslim community itself and the others. And the third is the actual discourse disseminated between mass organization, religious mass organization. We can mention among them, for example, two great mass organization, Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah, who are known by their moderate religious affiliation and ideology, and how the personality of religious figures respond this crisis. So when we see at least from different crises in Jakarta, in Java especially, because I'm worrying that my view or my outlook is Java centric. So so I must confess before starting. So I think that actual condition of Muslim community is not happy, is bad enough, I think, because few from three factors mentioned. I mean, the actual state of crisis of capitalism and labor condition in factories and so on, and also the state policy towards Muslim communities, and discourse and the response of leading or personality of religious personalities in the public sphere. Actual condition is not good. So what I mean by it's not good, I mean that Muslim communities have some sentiments to be discriminated and to be I mean it is like a metaphor, victim of actual condition. So this, I think, because I want to analyze first by first. So for example, in the sphere of state policy is very, I think, is very very ill practiced in the field. First, we can speak about the restriction, the censorship, and the forbidding of religious activities during the outbreak of the virus until now. So this restriction is not well socialized among the society, among Muslim communities. Meanwhile, state impose this restriction, especially in the area where there was no potential threat towards the people. For example, in many village, the little mosque or musalla, or the place for prayer should be closed or forbidden, and any activities automatically are forbidden. So this makes some anger to Muslim communities, and I think that the problem is this restriction and social censorship, I call it, are not well socializing. Are not well socialized among society. So this raises some question about disobey. Yeah, I mean that the people try to disobey some restriction, and by fleeing and by silently making activities in mosque, in public areas. For example, when there was people died, we have, for example, a ritual, a rite like recital, Quran recital. I mean tahlilan. We call it tahlilan. They just do yes. Okay. So they just do tahlilan silently without any consideration about virus. So in other side, this is worsening by the inconsistency or the lack of consistency in the government's part itself. Because, for example, in one region, in one city, or in one village, there is repression or restriction, the hard one for sometimes, but in other place there is nothing. So this confuse people. And other side, people are imposed to have a self-discipline by staying home and so on. But this also cannot resolve the problem of work, for example, and how to make a living, for example. So
I'm sorry,
I think
Fayat, maybe it's time to wrap up a little bit because we still have another speaker, sometimes a little bit constrained.
Okay.
So,
Can I ask
sure.
3 minutes? Okay, just for finishing this. Okay, thank you, Mbak Rizky. Okay, so this is this restriction rise about many opinions. Okay, and in the parts of religious organization, I think I not to respond, at least to respond toward this policy. The first, they keep disobey. I mean they keep to disobey government, I think, or local authorities, and staying normal like every day, like before the pandemic. And the other one, they show the more submission to government instruction. So I think this is the general. So this raise many issues, and which is not strictly or totally accurate, because there are many propaganda about relating this to the theory of conspiracy and so on, hoax and so on, and this is the Chinese intervention and so on, and many issues that has been widespread in before the election. I mean, from the pro Jokowi and anti Jokowi, for the elected president now, rise again now. So this is the sentiments of the old political cleavage before the election, and this is worsening because the actual concern of religious personalities and religious mass organization to those who are affected really by the crisis. I mean, the workers, the migrants, and also the elders, the children, and so on, are not focused on, are not really built on strategic and strategic solidarity. I mean, there is no platform for solidarity. I mean, in all the level of mass religious organization, to keep how this affected people by the pandemic can be sustained or survive the crisis. So yes, now many donation movement, many solidarity made voluntary for I mean that voluntary initiative to help some people affected by the loss of living or by the loss of yeah, I mean the loss of job and so on start to rise. But this actually in general this is uh, separated. I mean this is disconnected, yeah, disconnected from the problem of capitalism and from and so on. So I mean that our condition, I mean that as Muslim, as a person and also as a citizen, I feel that there are many dissatisfaction among the Muslim communities toward the actual situation, and they should actually give the role to the religion to give more security, a more feeling of security and more sense of a community amid the crisis. But what is actually happening is the reverse, the otherwise. Okay, so instead of deepening the sense of crisis, now the pandemic got to convince the people that we are getting to the new normal, and this is just for me this is just illusion, because there is no new normal for me, because many people affected, they are still living in hard condition. Okay, thank you, Mbak Rizky.
Yes, thank you very much, Fayed. That's very insightful explanations. Now, please, Reverend Jerome.
Our next speaker will talk about the state of Muslim communities in Mindanao. It's Amira Ali Lidasan. She is from Diswara Bangsamoro and Moro Christian People's Alliance. Without further ado, please go ahead, Amira.
So, Assalamualaikum, Ramadan Kareem, and advance Eid Mubarak, to my brothers and sisters. When we speak about COVID cases in the Philippines, I think today we have a staggering case of 13,434 with 846 deaths and 3,000 recovered. So with that number, we're already on our third month, and it doesn't, because of the number is increasing, it doesn't give confidence to the people to go out, despite the government saying, oh, we're lowering the security measures, you're now allowed to go back to your work. Workers or school can open, and people can go out, you can visit the mall. But because of this increasing number of COVID cases and the death, we are more and more people are afraid, not very confident that the government is doing something or anything to flatten the curve, stop COVID, and contain the infection or the contagion or the pandemic. In Mindanao, we have the biggest number of COVID cases are there in Davao City. But Bangsamoro areas also have this month showed that despite of the previous announcement of the Bangsamoro government that the Bangsamoro government, meaning the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao, that it's a COVID-free region. At the middle of May, suddenly we have these staggering numbers of cases, no, and confirmed COVID cases. So we have 291 dispersed in the 5 provinces of the Bangsamoro government, and we have uh, the highest is in Sulu. Sulu is very near Malaysia, no? Sulu and Tawi-Tawi. Those are the islands that are very near Borneo. And we have there, no? Sulu. And then we have the second biggest number is in Basilan. That's also in the island provinces. No, in the month of March and April, we never hear anything about the cases. They're all saying there's no COVID case there. There are no PUMs and PUIs and suspects. No confirmed cases. But now that we have mass testing, or sorry, that people are slowly testing, no, or getting back the swabs that were tested 10 days ago or weeks ago. Now we've shown that government data has shown that there are COVID infections all throughout the Bangsamoro areas, and there are confirmed deaths. Some of the first cases that we had, they were pointing at the cause coming from the outside. To our Malaysian speaker, no, they said that most of those who were who participated in the Tabligh conference in Malaysia, no, but there are more than 1,000 participants, and there are, I think, more than 100 participants from the Philippines. So most of them, when they went back to Mindanao, they were tested positive, and one already died. So it was the government was pointing at that incident that brought COVID in the Bangsamoro area. Of course, brothers and sisters, this is hearing that, no, it's kind of discriminatory, because it's like it points to a religious gathering practice, and we know that it is not about the religious gathering or practice, but it's about in general, the meeting of people, of many people in one area that caused, no, that number of infected with COVID. Now, because of the number of when the World Health Organization said that you have to do something about the staggering numbers, no, the rising numbers of COVID, you have to flatten the curve. That's what they said. The government, many governments, no, employed the harshest measures of security. No, so we know about the lockdowns, but the gravity of these lockdowns and the impact of these lockdowns is had been very difficult for our brothers and sisters. In the middle of April, the government, so we started quarantine or lockdown in March, middle of March. And then when things kept soaring, no, the COVID cases kept soaring, so they issued a very harsh quarantine measure, that is the enhanced quarantine and community quarantine, and that enhanced community quarantine becomes so very strict here in Cotabato City, we had to all the villages, no, had to have their own checkpoints. Aside from the checkpoints at the in the highway, no, borders were locked, no, and it's difficult to stock supply because at that time we're nearing Ramadan already, and you know us, Muslim brothers and sisters. If it's Ramadan, we're preparing for it at least a week. We stock up our food supply because sometimes we do not want to travel or go out of the community just to buy, no, for daily our daily food. So we're stocking food, but at that time there's already restrictions of how many supply can family have, and so it was very difficult for our brothers and sisters. Plus, you cannot leave the house without a quarantine pass, and then you cannot travel because there's no public transport. So only those who have cars, and the cars must have also their passes, no. So that's how restrictive it is, and you can only have one person in the household who can go out of the to buy our food, no. And inside these markets and groceries, you have limited supply, no. So those are the problem. There were so many requirements for you to pass the checkpoints. You must have a face mask. You must have a quarantine pass, no. There's a window hour, 5 hours for you to go out, and then the next person can go out at this window hour also. And then there's also color coding for most of the cars, no. So this has become a problem because they said they're solving the solution by not making more and more people outside of the area. But actually, because of these window hours and because of this, it also increases the number of people going to market, to groceries. So that's a very big problem. In rural areas, there's also a big problem to our brothers and sisters who are in farming communities, because at this time, when here in Mindanao, it's really difficult to say that we have an abundant supply of rice and basic food that we have, or basic crops that we have, because most of the lands here in Mindanao have been converted into monocrop plantations. So just imagine that we need the rice, we need that supply of rice. We lack the supply now, and in terms of in cases of emergency, now the government is importing, no, from other countries, rice producing countries, just so they could give to the communities that needed this rice, no. Another problem is harvesting crops, no, especially in conflict areas, because despite of the cases of COVID, and our fear that we will be killed by COVID, the Bangsamoro areas are more likely to fear being killed by bombs, especially from coming from the military operation, or born out of the military operation. Despite of the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, the government, there was no respite, of the government military operation. They used aerial bombardment, they used mortar shelling, and they were very proud of their accomplishment of killing quote and unquote terrorists in our communities. So they did that in Matindanao, in Patikul, Sulu, in some areas in Lanao, and some areas also in North Cotabato. And some of our brothers and sisters who are in that, farmers who are in that conflict areas, cannot harvest their crops. They have to ask for a permit from the military. And there are cases that the military would give the permit, but then the farmer gets killed. No, he gets killed because he is mistaken by the military who are patrolling inside the conflict area as members of Abu Sayyaf or members of the BIFF. So that's also one of the things that the people are scared about, because they are always suspected not as COVID-19 infected people, but suspected as terrorists in communities of conflict. No, so that's other area. So military operations continue. Another also that happened during the Ramadan, which is very sad for to note, no, for us brothers and sisters. We have this clan feud or family feud, no, we call Rido, no, and Rido happened in the middle of our observation of the fasting, and we are all concerned because it has also brought, just like the military operation, it has also brought a lot of our brothers and sisters displaced, dislocated from their communities, and had to find go to makeshift evacuation centers, and that happened in North Cotabato. It's very sad because it's Bangsamoro versus Bangsamoro. It's Moro National Liberation Front versus Moro Islamic Liberation Front groups. And Alhamdulillah, I think the Bangsamoro government had already intervened and slowly arranging, the conflict. But there's also conflict inside our city. You see, Cotabato City is part of the Bangsamoro government. It voted yes in 2019 election, but until now, it's not part of the Bangsamoro government for technical reasons. But the Bangsamoro government is inside Cotabato City. I mean, the Bangsamoro office is inside Cotabato City. So sometimes the conflict also comes in there, Bangsamoro versus Bangsamoro, because our mayor in Cotabato City is also a Muslim, but she's always criticizing the employees of Bangsamoro government who comes in and out of the city at the time that she followed the strict regulation of community quarantine. So for a long while, we've been sort of seeing these kinds of youths in our community. Now, as for the government support, to our brothers and sisters who have lost their job, these daily wage workers, it took, I think, more than a month for the government to really give out that 275 billion fund. They call it the Social Amelioration Fund. We're supposed to get the 5,000 to 8,000 support from the pesos, support from the government for families. They said that should be categorized as poorest of the poor. It's as if most of with the COVID, with the lockdown, with most of us not having access to work, stopping for work and access to business, we can all, everyone can be categorized as impoverished during COVID times, but the government has to limit, the number of people who will receive this social amelioration, and it took them how many days just to get the data, and in the end, they had a problem of getting the right data, and the problem also faced where our brothers and sisters had to line up, under the scorching heat of the sun just to get that social amelioration package or program from the government. Now, for most of our brothers and sisters also, who were at the time of the enhanced, the community quarantines, whether it's enhanced, general, or it's the same strict how do you call that, implementation that the government did. So there were so many reports of those arrested because they did not wear face masks. there were those brothers and sisters who were arrested, and then because they violated the curfew, they were all immediately presented to the fiscal's office, inquested, and then sent to jail. And some of them had to pay. These are poor people, okay? They had to pay an amount, a huge amount, just to bail themselves out, no? And there were so many arrests that we criticized that we're calling for mass testing of COVID-19. We're not calling for mass arrest, not the mass arrest that the government is doing. No? Now, the government is saying, oh, it's general community quarantine. You can all go back now to your work. Workers, go back to your work. And then students, you can study, no? If you can also go back to school. I mean, everyone can now go out, no? Are allowed to go out. The malls have been open. Some of the activities, no?
You can now
have been ano. But the problem is testing is still at its lowest. In Mindanao, before, for 2 months, we only have one testing center. That's in Davao City. Now, in the middle of May, I think the government has recognized 2 more, Zamboanga City Medical Center and Cotabato City Medical Center. Alhamdulillah, because of that, most of our brothers and sisters can avail. But the problem is there mass testing going on in our communities? That's very difficult to say. Now, hearing from the government that they're saying, we're not doing mass testing. It's the private, if the workers want to go back, it's the private corporations responsibility to do the testing of their workers. So that's really sad and condemnable, because we're like condemning our brothers and sisters to go back to work, without giving them the necessary medical needs, So in final sentence, it's difficult to say that the government is responding well to the COVID-19 crisis, or they're really flattening the curve. Although we always hear that from the government, that they're doing everything. But the World Health Organization said, yes, you have to flatten the curve, you have to do quarantine, but there needs to be mass testing before you can isolate the people. You isolate the infected from the healthy ones. But the government is only doing the quarantine in its strictest measures, And I think governments like President Duterte's administration likes to have this kind of virus like the COVID-19. It's every tyrant's dream, because it justifies the military-like measures that they are doing now to suppress the rights of the people and to suppress the rights of the people here in our country. So that's all. That's all. Assalamualaikum, and thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Amira Ali Lindasan from Suara Bangsamoro. Before we go to the last member of the panel of the speakers, let me remind everybody that you can post your question to the chat, to the Q&A icon that you can see at the bottom of the screen. You can post your question there if you have questions and clarifications to our speakers. The next speaker is the director of the Teleganita. Teleganita is a migrant service institution in Malaysia. It's a human rights organization dedicated in assisting, building, advocating, and protecting migrants, refugees, women and children from exploitation, abuse, discrimination, slavery, and human trafficking. The one I'm talking about is Glorinda, the director of Tinaganita. You can, without further ado, can now share your analysis and situation of the Malaysia, Glorin.
Thank you, Reverend Jerome. Assalamualaikum and peace upon everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to be able to share some of our analysis based on the work that we have been doing with the communities of migrants, refugees, women, and children, especially those who have been trafficked into the country. Just a little bit of an overview. There are 32 million population in Malaysia, and Malaysia is a multiracial country where approximately 60% of them are Muslims. And Muslim is constitutionally the country's official religion, but with the freedom to practice other religions as well. But I also want to add that there are 2.2 million documented migrant workers in Malaysia and 4 million undocumented migrants who are also predominantly from the Muslim community. Then we also have about almost 250,000 asylum seekers and refugees, where almost 120,000 are the Rohingyas, both registered and unregistered. We also have the Myanmar Muslim communities, as well as communities from Yemen, Pakistan, Somali, Afghan, Palestine, and Iraq. So there is this huge number of Muslim communities. And my presentation today is going to be very much focused on migrants and refugees, not so much on the general Malaysians who are Muslims. So moving on, as of yesterday, a little bit of a statistic. Malaysia recorded 50 new COVID-19 cases, putting the total number of infections to 7,059. And this is very little compared to the numbers that has been shared by the other panelists today. But regardless, there are 7,000 who have been affected. Out of this, 5,800 have recovered, and the number of deaths remains at 114. As of today, in the past few days, there's no death. So we thank God for that. But unfortunately, out of the 50 new cases yesterday, 41 of them are foreigners, of which 34 cases were confirmed positive at Bukit Jalil detention camp. Now, despite the several warnings from Tinaganita and many CSOs, NGOs, and health activists, the detention of undocumented person continues, and this is of grave concern to us. Now, since the start of the pandemic, the next slide, Ray. Since the start of the pandemic, followed by the movement control order, Tinaganita has been disseminating the correct and factual information on the symptoms of COVID-19 to the migrant and refugee communities in the language that they understand. And when we knew that many of the refugee and migrant communities participated in the tabligh prayer gathering along with 15,000 people, immediately our community mobilizers, the officers and volunteers were on the ground encouraging, even facilitating the affected communities to go for testing and screening. In fact, we had our 24-hour hotlines open at all times for communities to call on us if they need any form of information, assistance, and interventions. And one of the main thing that started emerging since their movement control order was the fact many of them were losing work. There was no employment, and that means there is no means of survival. So they started asking us to send them food. So together with a few other organizations, we initiated the food relief. And till today, we have actually been able to give to 35,000 families of migrants and refugees, including the Malaysians of the low-income communities. And we also found out that they are being given notice of evictions, being thrown out of the houses, of the places of stay, because they have not been able to pay the rent. So we have also started another initiative looking for donors who could help the communities in paying their rent. And of course, the ongoing shelter, especially with the increased number of cases on SGBV, which is sexual gender-based violence and gender-based violence, domestic violence. So we had to open up our spaces to take on women and children who were affected during this period of time, and the continuous advocacy efforts that we do with different multi-stakeholders. Next. On 23rd March, the Health Ministry announced that testing for this disease will be free for all foreigners. In fact, some ministers assured us that there will be no arrest and detention when they come forward for this testing. And then we heard that there were ongoing arrests and detention of undocumented workers during this MCO period. And we did warn the government through our statements, through our engagements, that this is clearly preventing them to come forward for testing. We were also very, very worried and apprehensive about migrants and refugees, both documented and undocumented, who were in the detention camp for different offenses, especially for not having proper valid documents. Now, given the knowledge that our detention camps and holding centers lack the proper health care, and it's been very well documented for its inhumane and intolerable conditions, we demanded the government that they must be immediately repatriated, especially the migrants and undocumented persons. As for refugees and asylum seekers, we demanded that they will to be released immediately to prevent exposure to COVID-19. Now, with the restrictions on movement being tightened from the very beginning of MCO in the beginning of March, migrants and refugees were really being pushed to the edge. Their access to health and food was so uncertain during these times, and what more with no work and no wages. It was really clear that MCO has actually taken away the only source of survival for them in Malaysia. In fact, from our analysis, they were more afraid of starvation and being thrown away from their places of stay, being not able to pay the rent, than of the virus itself. Going on, we also expressed our concern for migrants who were living in the construction site, crammed in apartments by employers and outsourcing agents, especially those who were working in the service sectors and manufacturing, stating that these workers were vulnerable and continue to be vulnerable because they live in congested shared quarters and do work that does not make it possible to practice strict social distancing. And what more, domestic workers who were working in confined and isolated conditions within a private domain. So we are very certain that the COVID-19 pandemic is triggering a new wave of human rights violation. Next, Then the raids started. I think all of you must have heard the raids that's been going on. It started on 1st May. More than 7,000 foreigners were taken. Upon checking the documents, almost 700 undocumented persons were arrested, the majority of them were migrant workers. Tenaga Nita, in our capacity, strongly denounced these operations as inhumane and cruel. Yes, there are thousands of them who are undocumented and within our presence, and this issue needs to be addressed seriously, but this is not the time to do so when we have a serious pandemic that threatens our life. And those who are being arrested were majority from the Muslim community currently observing the holy month of Ramadan. And to proceed with this mass crackdowns would be a ruthless act in principle. And what more, to see the arrest of minors and women during this operation, even a child as young as 1 year old. Next. These are some of the headlines in the media on the arrest and detention and deportation. I'm not going to go much into it, but if the organizers can share this particular slides, you can click on the link to read more about it. Next. Just zooming into the arrest and detention that has taken place since 1st of May. There could be more, but this is what we have from our data. We were not given food. When we asked Rela for some food, they said, "You will get a lot of food in the detention camp soon." This is from Johnny, who was arrested in Taman Sri Murni. I would like to share another quote from another person who has been arrested. He said, "If Ramadan means struggle, test, challenges, and pain, we, the refugees and migrants, are a great example of those. But I also remember at the end of Ramadan, Shawwal begins, and it means victory. We hope none of us will give up, even if we were to die soon." This is from Munir, who was arrested at Taman Wilayah. The above quotes tell you how much of fear that is instilled in them, uncertainty and pain. This ruthless actions of arrest and detention is really, really heartbreaking and painful for many of us who we are directly linked to have been arrested and detained. And the question that we have asked the general public, the government, the UN organizations and institutions is, why do we continue to penalize and criminalize these communities who have the least in our society? Next. These are the nationalities of the victims who have been arrested, where I had mentioned earlier that 95% of them are Muslims. Next. These are some of our responses since the movement control started. We have been releasing one statement after another, even sent a couple of letters to Immigration Department for meeting, but of course there's not been much response. And I would like to mention that based on our statements and the positions and the support that we have been giving to these communities, during this time, we are faced with slandering, by populist and opportunistic politicians. The local media is filled with xenophobic remarks and violent hatreds, along with demands that the foreigners go back to where they come from. And there's been xenophobic campaigns which include did our pictures and names and photographs circulated along accusation, and this has clearly injected further fear in the community, into the community struggling for food and shelter during this pandemic lockdown. I just want to go on a little bit more, maybe one slide on undocumented status. There is so many misconceptions, right, surrounding the undocumented status among the general public in Malaysia, and we are continuously discrediting them, with facts and details as well as evidence we have collected over the years. Among the root causes, as many of y'all know, and in many of my presentation in the past years, of one becoming undocumented, the root causes of one becoming undocumented in Malaysia is the widespread corruption among the authorities, as well as fraud and cheating by agents. And many of them who come here into the country come with valid documents, but the systems have made them undocumented. So where is justice to them at this time when they are arrested and detained? Rather, they are deemed as illegals to be treated as criminals. And this is clear weaponization of migrants and refugees. And during this time, the Malaysian public, the Malaysian government, politicians, all those who are involved have to play the blame game. And clearly, migrants and refugees have become the convenient weeping boy. And quite frankly, we know migrant workers and refugees have nothing to do with COVID-19 in spreading the disease itself. We do not want Malaysia to be an imperialist state by instilling fear in the communities who are already marginalized and are at the most vulnerable situations. So we demand, we protest, we dialogue, we plead that the Malaysians and others come forward to push the government to put a stop and halt to this inhumane and cruel act during this pandemic. For we should be saving and improving lives, not destroying and traumatizing lives through this arrest and detention. And above all, we pray. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Glorine, for the slides and lots of information you shared there. So we're now directly open our live questions and answer sessions. We have already 2 questions, and I will read the first question. And please be reminded that we have a time constraint. So for the panelists, please kindly make it short. And so I will read the first question. This is for, I think, for Fayat and for Sister Amira. What do you believe is the new normal for our Muslim brothers and sisters after the COVID-19 in Indonesia and in Muslim areas in Philippines? So perhaps Fayat will start, and then Sister Amira will also follow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sister Rizky. I just want to repeat the question, please. What do you believe is the new normal, or?
Yes, what do you believe is the new normal for our Muslim brothers and sisters after COVID-19?
You mean that, or he means that what I believe about the new normal, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you. I think that the road to the new normal is not too easy, or not smooth, smooth as we hope, and it cannot be happening soon, I think, because the condition is very serious. So for me, thinking about new normal is thinking about all the social and economic and also religious situation that is that are totally ready for the crisis or for the next crisis or for the next trial, because we Muslims treat this COVID-19 disease as a trial from God to our faith. And I think the new normal should be should transform all this belief into the real condition, into the social, economic, and religious transformation in the sphere of I mean in all the spheres of society and all the level of society, either individually or socially or communally. So I think it's not easy to imagine the new normal for right now, I think, because many urgent tests to be resolved before. But I just propose some proposal to imagine what we call the new normal. But I prefer the novelty. I think the novel situation, the novel condition, the novel structure, the novel relation between state and society, between state and citizen, and also between state and Muslim community that are not antagonistic right now, like today, but also not totally submissive to the will of state. Okay, for example, the new novelty. I mean, the novelty, the political, the novelty can be felt or can emerge in the situation where the higher solidarity arise between people, between Muslim communities, and they just forget their references. They just forget their mass organization, affiliation, and so on. Because now in Indonesia we have still some prejudice each other between what they call moderate Islam and radical Islam, conservative Islam, and so on. So this just harden this is this obstruct many dialogue, many solidarity between Muslim community itself. So, and the second one, the Muslim community should gain a more public conscience or rise more public conscience or new public conscience to push more pro-people health policy that are which is more ready to the crisis and the next time. Okay, and also a more solidarity for the working class, for example, and for the informal sector, for example, by creating economic movement together, for example, to change the skin now from the capitalization, from urbanization, and from mass concentration in the cities and so on, to more autonomous and more local modes of economic production and so on. And I think this is just the situation now is just an invitation, open invitation to imagine this kind of novelty. Thank you.
Okay, Assalamualaikum again. as I've said earlier, COVID-19 is every tyrant's dream, and President Duterte is one in overusing COVID-19 as an excuse to employ the military-like measures. Or for us, the new normal would mean martial law, because it's there are so many restrictions. We cannot have a mass movement. We cannot have a mass rally. If you criticize the government, you will be arrested. If you post something and or forward share a post that's very critical to the government, you can be arrested. And there were many arrests that were made concerning COVID. So I've said before, in checkpoint areas also, if you're not wearing a mask, even if it's not in the bill or in the law that says you can be arrested, detained if you're not wearing a mask, all the police in the checkpoint areas are doing it, and even the lawyers, the fiscals, are also inquesting all these victims. So the rights that we had enjoyed and fought for before are now being eroded under this new normal. Physical distancing, they call it the social distancing, is actually preventing us from talking to people, discussing with other people outside of these online webinars, and then gatherings, and also from criticizing and saying what the people think is the truth. As for the Muslims, it's very difficult because now, for example, maybe tomorrow or on Sunday, we will have the Eid. So we cannot pray in our congregational prayer because it's not allowed. And all the religious, the muftis, and the Darul Ifta, they're all talking about staying at home. Just stay at home. Don't pray at the mosque. Don't pray at the in public. Despite all people, they are very cautious about COVID and would want to pray that they would also want to observe physical distancing. But all this talk about suppression of our religious observance also questions the people. For 2 months, we've been cooped up in our homes. So what's happening outside? What is the government doing? For 2 months, we have not prayed in the mosque. We have not prayed the Tarawih. The Laylatul Qadr. So, what has the government done to prepare our community, our society, for it to be sort of prepared for people to come back? So for 2 months, we were cooped up, and yet the government is not doing mass testing, is not doing isolation of people, but all doing this what we call violation of the rights of our people. So it's the new normal. We should really study it because it's a martial law like approach of the government. There should be a balance between what is the real scientific and medical needs, for us to not to be infected with COVID, and for us not to be a problem also of our the public health of our society. There should be a study also of the public health of our of what is the government doing to public health, because in the previous they're not prioritizing it, and until now they're not prioritizing it in terms of budget, in terms of concern. What they're prioritizing is its military might, these checkpoints, these measures, these military-like measures, and then all the critics, they're attacking the critics to the point that they are equating COVID to the left organizations. They've been in so many areas, like in the northern Luzon or in Cordillera. We have also in Surigao, here in eastern Mindanao. There's also in central Luzon. Military in helicopters have been throwing papers up in the air, no, papers to areas that they say that has presence of the New People's Army, and they're saying the people, they put messages on those papers. They're saying, go back to the government, or else you'll have COVID. So rebels is equals to COVID, no? And left to our criticizing the government is equals to COVID. Now, how come it's already discussed in that level when the government is the one who's not doing anything to stop COVID? So that those are the things that we were doing. Another is that at the height of the COVID pandemic, we were all afraid. No, we have to practice physical distancing. But this government, they've been arresting a lot of people, putting them in jails. You know our conditions in our jails, no? The prison conditions are so, it's like you cannot breathe inside a prison cell, no? So some of the human rights organizations have wrote, no, the president and the Department of Justice to look into the conditions of the persons who were in prison and release some of them, especially those who are elderly, sick. And we also said that you review the cases of political prisoners, because there are some of the people there who were filed with trumped up charges, who are not supposed to be inside prison. But the government's response is no. No, and they've been saying that they've been releasing some of the poor people, and we don't know, because the COVID is already creeping inside the prison cell, because the cells are congested, and some of those officials, the prison officials, infected also the prisoners. So it's really a pandemic also inside the prison cells. But everything that we criticize and we say the government should look into, they're all downplaying it as no. What we want is for you pasaways, or you who do not listen, no, to stay at home and not go out and follow our rules. That's the new normal. And that's very difficult for us, because it will strip us of our rights. We should be very critical of all the measures that the government will release in connection with with how they will define the new normal. Because if it's the military speaking, and the military or the hawks in the government that are speaking in defining the new normal, then all our rights will be eroded. There should be a strong voice from the scientific community and the medical community in defining the new normal that is apt, to how to really combat COVID, the disease, the virus, and not the people and even the critics. So I think I hope that I have answered the question.
Mira, the next question is for Glorine. What did the government say are the reasons for the recent crackdown? What do you think is behind this observable intensified crackdown? Hello, Glorine? Are you there?
Reverend, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. What did the government say about the reasons for the recent crackdown? What do you think is behind this observable intensified crackdown?
Well, in all our questions to the relevant ministry, especially the Home Ministry and the Immigration Department, saying why is there a crackdown at this time when we should be fighting the pandemic instead? But also in the beginning of the pandemic, ministers have issued many different statements saying that there will not be any arrest and detention when migrants and refugees come forward for testing. So this is really going back on their word, no? And this has created a form of mistrust from migrant workers and communities. Now, why? Now, I don't like to use the word throwing or killing a bird with two birds with one stone, but this is exactly what they are doing. A couple of years ago, 2 years ago, the Minister of Home Affairs, who is now currently the Prime Minister, had made a statement saying that they want to flesh out illegals. That's the right word. That's the exact word that they had used at that time. And that he and his ministries, together with the authorities, were going to make their lives so miserable, to the point that they cannot live in Malaysia anymore. And then they will be surrendering themselves and then being blacklisted and then consequently or eventually being deported. But our analysis has been right now, because there's been an emerging pattern in the 20 years. We know there is this huge number of undocumented workers and persons in Malaysia, and programs after programs have been introduced by the government for more than 10 years. But then there is still a big number of undocumented persons. And again, as I said earlier in my presentation, this is due to the corruption that is so embedded in our system. But instead of addressing those who are corrupted and the system itself, they further criminalize migrant workers and refugees who are undocumented. So that's one. The second analysis is, as you may already know, we also said that migrant workers are the ATM machines for politicians in Malaysia. So they are trying to clear everyone from Malaysia and blacklist them so they can have new workers coming in. Even if you do a financial analysis, there's not much monetary gains or profits gained by legalizing this undocumented workers in the process. But then there's more gain that awaits them, profit awaits them, if there's going to be new recruitment in a year or two when this is finally slowed down and there is opportunities for businesses and is a way to really stabilize the downgoing economy that we are currently having now. So I think, again, it goes to show how migrant workers are being used as profit means for Malaysia. I hope I made sense there. And what really is the push factor for this particular crackdowns?
Okay. Since we have a lot of questions that posting in our chat group, the next question is maybe it also includes wrapping up from the speakers, the last word. The next question is, what are your analysis of the growing human rights violations in COVID pandemic? And another thing from is, are there cases of sexual and sexual abuse against migrants amid the crackdown of undocumented migrants?
Reverend, can I just respond, because I have to leave in a while. I have another meeting scheduled. So as I had also mentioned, that this particular pandemic could trigger a new wave of human rights violations. And this is in particularly to companies who are not careful to eliminate forced labor in companies, in its plantations and its supply chains. You know, when people are so immersed in making profit of the bad, from the workers who are right now vulnerable and defenseless, they will not change their ways. You know, for example, in the rubber industry, you know, some of the companies in Malaysia was overjoyed with the demand that they got from throughout the world, you know, in making the PPE equipments, from the gloves and so forth. But then they did not understand how this will affect the workers. How are they going to protect the workers through social distancing and other forms of health-related prevention, which could be really unfamiliar to many. So with little concern to them, you know, they don't really care whether the workers are working in tight and unhygienic quarters, you know, to become afflicted by COVID-19. And during these times, we have to push employers and businesses that they must take on responsibilities towards their workers. In fact, we have heard that some of these workers in these manufacturing sectors are working without rest to meet the demands, right? And these industries are clearly, you know, prioritizing profit over people. And how is social isolation, social distancing even feasible for workers, you know, who might be diagnosed, who might be affected but not tested, but they are crammed up in a room working, you know? So this is really worrying for us, you know. When during this pandemic, we have also seen, when you talk about human rights violation, you know, we have seen overwhelming solidarity between communities and nations, you know, to address the impact. But unfortunately, what we are seeing here is an alarming increase on this migrant sentiments, anti-refugee sentiments, you know, misinformation and stigma, with devastating consequences for migrants and refugees as well. And this is clearly demonstrated, you know, in the increase of hate speeches against them. And we as the human rights defenders are also threatened and targeted. I believe yesterday the UN Special Rapporteur supported some of our demands by saying that he's very concerned about the crackdowns and the detention of the migrants, including children, who have been in the overcrowded immigration detention facilities. Now, in terms of domestic violence, sexual exploitation, there is definitely a spike in the cases, you know, of domestic violence, which includes both local and foreigners. But then the cases that have come to us continue to be abuse cases of domestic workers. Even during this pandemic, we have been able to rescue them from abusive situation. In terms of sexual exploitation, we have not been getting much cases, simply because I think the traffickers and syndicates in terms of sex trafficking has become so sophisticated and taking advantage of this MCO to actually go underground. So we are also a bit worried about this particular situation, but we have been working with some intelligence who have been able to give us information. We have been able to stop people from being trafficked into the country for sexual exploitation, but also for labor exploitation. But we are not able to give you more details of the current situation during this pandemic. But, you know, what we have handled is very limited, so it may not speak for the entire grave situation. I think I would like to end with saying that there is an urgent need for comprehensive responses to be in place that respects all human rights and dignity of migrants and refugees, and that means including them in the current financial and health planning of the pandemic response. Thank you so much.
From Muhammad Al-Fayad and Amira Hidasan. Please make it short because we are running out of time already.
Okay, the last statement. Okay, hello. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I think that we should rethink our act of faith in the time of crisis today. So just the last statement before departing, before leaving. First, for us, how to translate our act of faith. I mean that solidarity not as manifested only in the time of crisis, of pandemic crisis, but also in the time of all the social and economic crisis, which can be lasting for the next years. And this act of faith shall be translated into the real social and political transformation at the more the greater scale, to the greater scale and all the level of, and this just need to all that all Muslim communities go beyond their differences. I mean that their affiliation and so on, to think together about the actual condition and how we survive the crisis by bringing our faith, and also by transforming the situation. And for the state, I think that I have many hopes that instead of politics of fear, politics of persecution and or discrimination and so on, instead of terrorizing his civilians, his citizens, I propose the politics of social solidarity, that is the real solidarity. So the state must be present now in Indonesia, especially because all the I mean the president and the vice president also they come from they are Muslim, but in approaching the crisis they are not manifesting their Islamic values that are compatible to the values of solidarity as the Prophet Muhammad has taught to us, and so on. And I think this is just what I can present this afternoon. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Muhammad Al-Fayad. Amira?
Okay. I think this time, as we approach the new normal, we have to. This is the time to be more critical, of what our government and governments, rest of the world, are. How do they approach? This is a time that we must be critical of their approach, on how to define this new normal. I forgot to share with you, just a little sharing that when you see a government that prioritizes a military budget instead of a public health budget, you have to question, are they really dealing with COVID? For example, if President Duterte would not give up on his 4.5 billion intelligence fund to a Department of Health that needs 3.4 billion, just to supply all the necessary test kits, lab centers, and PPEs for the frontliners. if you will not give up that, then there's a big question also on what is the real approach of the government to combat COVID-19. Third is, in the middle of our COVID-19 crisis, and the government kept on saying, we cannot do mass testing because we do not have a budget. We cannot do mass testing because it's unrealizable, etc. You hear that the government recently entered into a $200 billion deal, a US dollar deal with the US government for an arms deal. Buy helicopters. For what? No, to combat COVID virus with the helicopters? No, to combat the people who are criticizing, to combat the people, no, to suppress the rights of the people. And that is a big question for us. No, if a government gives the power to the military over its medical and the people, the needs of the people, then that is a question on how they like COVID very much, because they use it to justify the evil things that they're doing against us. As for the Muslim community, yes, it's a test for all of us. It's a test of our faith, because we cannot do sambayang in our congregation. No jamaat, no masjid for us, no. But it's also a time to question, no. Does our government really care for us? Because if they care for us, they would do the most scientific and medical approach, that is to make us live, no, for us to live, no. So they should have taken care of us by enhancing our public health, enhancing our capacity, no, to combat COVID medically and scientifically. So.
Thank you to all the participants who participated in this informed webinar. And this informed webinar is again co-organized with the Progressive Islamic Forum of Indonesia. And I thank you, Rizky Apiat, for co-hosting this webinar. And all your questions will be answered in the Facebook, because we are live. We will take all your questions, and we will answer it to directly to the speakers, and they will give you an answer to your question. Rizky, do you want to say something?
Okay, yeah, of course. Thank you very much for all the participants, all the questions, and all the appreciations. And for the panelists, thank you very much. We speak about the politics of social solidarity. We speak about fighting the virus and not the people. And we also talk about migrants. And I hope we all could find our home for all of us, for the migrant workers, for the poor, for the underprivileged, and build collaboration for a more equal society. Thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you very much. Let us all express our compassion and solidarity amidst this COVID. Thank you very much. Bye bye.